In this video, we're focusing on circles and semicircles. So it's important just to remember a circle is not a function because it fails the vertical line test. So when you hold up a pen to a function, a graph of a function, you're going left to right, and the function touches that pen or paper or whatever you're using at two spots, it fails the test, therefore it's not a function. So before we move on, we're going to cover two types of circles here. Firstly is the circles with the center at the origin, 0, 0. And that's a really simple equation. It's r squared equals x squared plus y squared, where r is your radius. As you can see, there's a diagram there, a graph of a typical circle there, where r is your radius going from the center of the circle to the outside. All right, the next one is a little bit more complicated. This is where the center is in a different location, some sort of coordinate on a grid. And it's given by r squared equals x minus a, and then squared, plus in brackets y minus b squared. And this time r is your radius, and the center is a and b. Now it's important to note, in the formula you notice it's negative a, negative b, or x minus a. Okay, so if you get a plus in there, you know it's actually a negative coordinate. So just remember that. So the example we have on the bottom here, we have the equation of 1 squared equals x minus 3 and then y minus 2 over there. So that would put the center of that circle at 3, 2, and its radius is 1. So it's going 1 to the left, 1 to the right, 1 up, 1 down, 1 all around. Okay? So here's our first example. We have some sort of circle. You need to sketch it and then state the domain and range. So the first thing I want to find is my radius. And that's going to be the square root of 4, because that's our constant over here. Okay, so that gets me 2. So we know we have a radius of 2, and then I need to also find my center. So my center for this one is going to be 2, 1, because remember, this is your A and this is your B. Okay, and they're both negative, so our center's in a positive area. So if I quickly sketch this up, we have something like 2 over here, 1 here. So I know the center of the circle is here. And then how I like to draw these, even because it is sketch, is I know it's a radius of 2, so I'm going up 2 spots here, so that's going to be 3. I'm going down 2 spots to negative 1 down here. You go across 2 spots there, and across 2 spots there. And then you try to draw a circle around that. Be a little bit neater than me. But essentially that's it, and we know that my radius here is going to be 2. It's 2 in all directions. I like to do those dots just to give me an idea of what I'm trying to draw there. Now the next part will state the domain and range. Remember, your domain is your x values, and your range is your y values. Alright, so in this case our domain is, if we're looking at a domain, we're going essentially from our furthest left all the way to our furthest right, which is over there. So our domain is going to be from 1, sorry, not 1, if I'm looking at x, it's going to be from 0 to 4. Alright, and remember, we have to use the square brackets because it actually includes that. Our function does go to 0 and it does go to 4. If you use curve brackets, it's saying it can go up to that point but not actually reach it. So now we're looking at our y, so we're going from up as high as we can, down to as low as we can. So that's going to be negative 1, 2, 3, and we're using square brackets as well. Alright, next, this is a little bit more tricky. These are the ones that you'll come across that can throw a spanner in works. They require you to complete the square. So I'm going to just set it up really quickly. 2x plus something plus y squared minus 2y plus something equals negative 1. And what I did there was I actually just quickly moved that negative 1 over like that. So I've got this, and remember, when you're completing the square, we want to half this number here. So that equals 1, so I know I'm going to get 1 squared here. Same with over here, 1 over 2 times 2 equals 1. So I know I'm going to get 1 squared there as well. So now that you've done that, when you're completing your square, remember that this becomes x plus 1 squared, and over here we get y minus 1 squared. And I know that's a minus here because that was a minus there. Now I can't just randomly do all these things. So notice in the red writing up here, we added those in. They weren't originally there. So what I need to do is also add them over here. So what I end up with is -1 + 1 + 1. So I end up with 1 there. Okay. Now that I've got it in that form, that looks very similar to if I had something like -a² + y - b² = r². So I know that my center is going to be at -1 and 1. And then my radius is going to be the square root of 1, which is just 1. Okay, so when you have something like that in that form, you see at the top here in orange, this part here, if you have that form, you need to make sure you're completing the squares for both the x values and the y values to get it into the appropriate form for us to actually know what the center and what the radius is. So we're also going to cover quickly semicircles. So semicircles have two forms. They have it where it's above the x and then one where it's below, and they have each a separate equation. So here's the one where it's above, here's the one where it's below, and the only difference you can see is that the square root in the one above is positive and the square root in the one below is negative. So if this whole thing is a positive, you know it's going to be above the x-axis, whereas if it's a negative, you know it's going to be below. So we need to sketch y = 36 minus x². All right, so let's begin. We know that it's a positive. That's the first thing I would take note of. So we know it's going to be above the x-axis. And then the next thing I'll do is I want to find what the radius is. Now, we have y = the square root of 36 minus x². And that looks very familiar to what our formula was. So I know my radius is going to be the square root of 36. So 6. So if I needed to go and sketch this, let's draw my grid. Let's say I have my grid here. I'll have -6 over here, 6 there, 6 here, and then I know it's above the x-axis, so it'll look something like that. Okay, a really rough sketch, but that's how you do it. Determine if it's positive or negative, find what the radius is, sketch out your values.